Canada and Sweden playing one heck of a game in the Four Nations face-off on Wednesday, and Gil Martin and I are going to recap that game, plus get into another vintage Sidney Crosby international performance right after this.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast. I am Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins, joined today by Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You're probably wondering, hey, where's Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers? Well, Nick is going to the Daytona 500 this weekend to watch the biggest race of the year for NASCAR outside of the Cup Championship Series. He's going to go watch some cars go vroom in circles. So he's down there doing that. He'll be back next week. So Gil, really appreciate you filling in for Nick and getting to talk some Four Nations face-off this week.
Well, thanks for having me, Hunter. Always great to talk a little hockey with you. And yeah, Four Nations got off to one heck of a start.
It absolutely did. And of course, thank you all so much for taking the time to make this your first listen / watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. You said it, man. This tournament got off to one heck of a start on Wednesday. There were some fans that were a bit skeptical going in, and I understood why. There's only 4 countries playing. It's kind of like a precursor / appetizer course to the Olympics. But I think a lot of the skeptics were proven a little wrong last night. I think also some people were saying, Gil, the players aren't going to try that much. It's a glorified all-star game. You wouldn't know it after watching last night. The players, look at the celebrations they had. This means something to them. A lot of these players are representing their countries for the very first time, and they're also playing for a spot on their Olympic teams in 26 because the NHL is going back to the Olympics for the first time in 12 years next year. Can you believe that, by the way? It's going to be 12 years between times where the NHL goes back to the Olympics. Pretty nuts. But again, it was an awesome back and forth game. Canada jumps out to a 2-0 lead. It looks like they're going to dog walk Sweden in this one, but a really nice pushback from Sweden. They're able to tie the game, send this to overtime before Mitch Marner wins the game. And this was just so much fun, man. We have really missed best on best hockey. And I understand, people, there's quite a few countries that are not here for this tournament, but in terms of last night, seeing a lot of these players play for their respective countries for the first time, it was a fantastic game. The overtime, Gil, was especially breathtaking. What were your thoughts while watching this game?
It was exciting. And it was, it looked like Canada, they score in the first minute of the game. And you think, okay, this one may be a rout. They're up 2-0. And it just seems like they're on cruise control. And I give Sweden a lot of credit for battling back, Brodin making it 2-1, and then they tie it in the third, only to lose the game in overtime. I was happy with the speed of the game, the intensity of the game. What did you think about the physicality of it? That was, I think, a big question heading into this tournament. How close to a regular season NHL game would we see the physicality be?
I thought it was very close. I mean, you saw some players really throwing their bodies. I mean, Shea Theodore, he got banged up. He's going to be out for the rest of the tournament. Vegas announced earlier on Thursday that he's going to be week to week, hoping for the best with him. Obviously, that was a concern heading into this tournament because you don't want to lose any of these players to big injuries. I mean, we've seen that before at the Olympics, many years ago. Obviously, again, you want Theodore to be healthy, but you really saw players putting everything on the line. But you want to know why, Gil? It's because representing their countries means so much to them. Again, they're playing for a spot on the Olympic team next year. And you saw Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon say after the game, this isn't an all-star game. It's not guys just, we're going for a skate. We're just goofing off, joking around. No, this is a competitive game between players that want to win this trophy and send a message heading into 2026 saying, oh yeah, we're the team to beat heading into the Olympics. And so I really like the physicality. I liked the game in general. You saw Canada's power play get things started very early in the first period. It didn't even take 30 seconds, Gil, for Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, and Sidney Crosby to just toy with Team Sweden. My biggest thing, let's not take penalties against Canada, people.
Yeah, no, you can't afford to do that. You give those guys a little more time and space to operate with, and you're in trouble. And the only question really is, how well do they know each other to really click on a power play? And as the tournament goes on, they're going to know each other a little bit better. So, to me, the big question heading into the tournament for Canada was goaltending. What did you think about the goaltending for Team Canada?
I thought Jordan Binnington was solid last night. I know that's obviously the biggest question for them because, they didn't bring Logan Thompson, who I would personally start if I were Canada. I would have brought him considering that the season that he's having. I think he's going to be a Vezina finalist at the end of the season, in my opinion, but they decided to go with other options. And Binnington, he made a couple of really big saves, especially in that overtime. There was a chance in that OT by Mika Zibanejad, really nice setup by Ricard Raquel to knife around a Canada defender, set up Zibanejad for a one-timer. Binnington slides across, lunges over to make the save. He had some really big, timely saves, and I won't be surprised if he gets to start against Team USA on Saturday in Montreal. That's going to be one heck of a game, one heck of an atmosphere. But Gil, we also have to discuss, I know we've been discussing a little bit of the game in this first segment, we have to discuss the pregame festivities as well. When you go to Montreal in the Bell Center, the running joke is it takes 30 minutes to try and, go through these pregame ceremonies. You go into players that played so long ago because the Canadians have such a historic franchise, rightfully so. But seeing Mario Lemieux come out, and I know people, I'm the Penguins person, so I have to be a little bit biased for this, but seeing him come out to that ovation, it gave me chills, man. It really did. Seeing him shake hands with Sidney Crosby, to see them reunite, the two best players in the franchise's history, was spectacular. Seeing him read the opening lineup card for Team Canada was great. John Cooper even said after the game that's the first time he's ever met Mario Lemieux. Just a fantastic moment for the sport of hockey, and it was really nice seeing those two reunite.
It was. And look, you say what you want about how long the Canadians take pregame. They do it right.
Yes.
I mean, it may take 20, 30 minutes, or we're exaggerating slightly, but it may take a long time, but I don't think any organization does pregame more dramatically and better than the Montreal Canadiens, and it showed again with Team Canada. And you're right. Look, Mario Lemieux, such a special story between his excellence on the ice, the health issues he had to overcome off the ice, the way, the fact that he is from the province of Quebec. You just add all of these things together, and it creates a magical moment for the fans in Montreal, for Canadians everywhere, for Penguins fans, as you alluded to. I just think that was a special, special thing.
100%. And I also felt the debut of the 10-minute overtime in this period last night was also pretty special. I do kind of want to see the NHL adopt this. I know not all of the players are going to be on board. You saw Nathan McKinnon after the game say, yeah, I don't think I want to do 10 minutes. I think 7 at most is best. He even said he was kind of feeling gassed there. Connor McDavid actually said that this would be a nice trial run for the NHL. He is on board with a 10-minute overtime. You'd have to get a lot of the approval of the players, but that game doesn't end in overtime without the 10-minute overtime, Gil. That goal was scored past the 5 minutes. So if you kept these same NHL rules in this one, this game would have went to a shootout. And as McDavid said after the game, I'll echo this here, no one wanted to see that game decided by a shootout. And you can tell that a lot of players are kind of over that as well. So what did you make of the 10-minute 3-on-3 last night?
I prefer the 10-minute overtime. Look, if it was up to me, I'd eliminate shootouts altogether. It's a skills competition, and I don't want, whether a team makes the playoffs or misses the playoffs shouldn't be determined by a skills competition. 3-on-3 hockey is different than 5-on-5 hockey, but it's still hockey. Yeah. And, to me, I want the game settled playing hockey rather than the skills. So 10-minute overtime would probably cut down on shootouts by a lot. And I may be in the minority, maybe because I'm old enough to remember when ties were still a thing in the NHL, but I don't mind playing a 10-minute overtime, and then if nobody scores, just saying it's a tie, it's fine with me.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I would prefer the 10-minute 3-on-3 as well. I'll be curious to see if there's some discussions between the league and the NHL Players Association regarding that, because that was breathtaking last night. Like, that was one of the best overtimes of 3-on-3 that I've watched in quite some time, in my opinion. So it was awesome seeing that. It was awesome seeing best on best, at least between these two countries, return, and just thought it was a fantastic game overall. But that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to discuss Sidney Crosby and how he had another vintage performance for Team Canada on the biggest stage for them. That's coming up in the second segment. Before we get to more discussion regarding Sidney Crosby, we have to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Wonderful Pistachios. It's one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for your unsaturated fats to help you keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the end-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, we're back here on this edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast. I'm Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins, that's Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders, filling in for Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers as he is going to the Daytona 500 this weekend. Gil, what else do I need to say about Sidney Crosby at this point? Another vintage performance from him. I said this to Pat on Locked On Penguins today. I'm going to echo to you this here. This is still Crosby's country for hockey. Everyone else is just a guest. Like the way that he can perform at such a high level on the biggest stage, the way that he was able to cook Gustav Forsling for one of the goals to set up Mark Stone last night was nasty. And Gustav Forsling is no slouch, people. I think he is the best defensive defenseman in the league, in my opinion. And the fact that he was able to absolutely work him in the offensive zone, thread the needle beautifully on that pass to Stone was awesome. The way he had eyes in the back of his head, he knew where Nathan MacKinnon was before he even passed that puck, that no-look pass. Nathan even looks at him, points at him, said, that's my dude right there. Awesome play on the power play, and then he gets the game-winning assist in overtime. Yes, was it a drop pass, people? Yeah, nothing special there, but he still gets the game-winning assist. But right before that, you saw the Montreal crowd chant his name, Crosby, 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 and he always gets a great ovation every time he comes to Montreal. Their fans absolutely love him there. He grew up a Canadiens fan. But even before the game, too, that was the loudest pop I had ever heard from the Montreal faithful to Crosby. And he's been playing this team for 20 years at this point. You saw with the Crosby chants, they wanted him to come on the ice and have another iconic moment. He had that in this one. You saw the Crosby chants again right before he was named the first star or the player of the game. Just awesome stuff. And he continues to add to his legacy as one of the greatest players to ever play this sport.
Look, he loves representing Canada and can't blame him for that. I mean, we even talked on the Monday edition of Locked On NHL about him sitting out the last 2 games for the Penguins so he would make sure that he was healthy enough to play for Canada. And it means a lot to him, and he always seems to rise to the occasion. And, you know, that is something that will be special to anyone who saw it. It will go down in history. If there's an international competition, Canada is playing, and Sidney Crosby is on the ice, you're going to see something special. And even at this stage in his career, where he is, you know, on the back 9 of his NHL career, he still saves his best for wearing that maple leaf. And I give him a lot of credit. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little annoying that he sat out the last 2 games, but I totally understood why. He was still a bit banged up. He wanted to represent Team Canada, and he deserves that right. I mean, he knows he's at the end of his career now. He knows that he's not going to be able to represent his country that much more. I mean, he's going to be doing it next year at the Olympics, but will he be doing it at the World Cup of Hockey in 2028? That was just announced on Wednesday. We'll have to see if he's still playing at that point. I mean, it's only 2 years after, but hey, you never know if he decides to retire before that. So at the very least, we're getting him for Team Canada for this and the Olympics next year. We'll have to see for 28, but he knows how much this means to him. He knows how successful Canada has been every time he's been the captain. And the players feed off of that, man. Like they really do. You saw Nathan MacKinnon just so giddy to play on a line with him. Mark Stone the same way. They have such an embarrassment of riches with so much younger talent. You know, McKinnon, obviously one of the best players in the world. McDavid, I still think is the best player on the planet. Cale Makar, I think is the best defenseman on the planet. But I think Crosby reminded a lot of people once again, hey, I'm still here. I'm still one of the best players in this league, and I will probably go down as a top 5 player to ever play this game. At least that's my opinion. I think he is already a top 5 player to ever play this game. And I even tweeted this last night too, Gil. I think more and more people finally got to see what Penguins fans have been seeing him do all year. This Penguins team stinks. Like, we all know that they're not going to make the playoffs, but that performance last night, that is what he has been doing on a nightly basis for this Penguins team. And I know some people would be like, whoa, you got to trade him. You got to trade him. Like, that's not happening. He is finishing his career here as a Penguin. I don't need to see any more stupid engagement bait posts from, Paul Bissonnette or whatever, or whoever else you listen to, or anyone else on social media. He's going to retire a Penguin. But that performance you saw last night, that's what he's been doing on the Penguins all year. It's just nice to see more national media people and more neutral fans see that and recognize that.
Well, how many people could have made that no-look pass? I mean, how many people would have even thought to try that pass, let alone execute it as well as Crosby did? So you got to give him, you got to tip your cap. When you see excellence, one of the best things about this tournament is that regardless of what team or what country you root for, you just can sit back and appreciate watching some of the best players in the game do their thing. And as a pure hockey fan, seeing a play like that no-look pass, you just have to enjoy that moment because it doesn't come around all that often.
100%. Heck, I was at the edge of my seat watching that game, and I'm American. I'm going to be watching the Americans tonight play Finland. We're going to get to that in the final segment, but that game really had me on the edge of my seat. And one of the main reasons, it had just been so long since we got a matchup like this with all the best players in the world representing their countries, at least for Sweden and Canada. It was, again, fantastic. And one more thing I want to get to before we head to break here, Gil. John Cooper, Canada's head coach, had a really cool quote after the game. He said, Crosby will go down as the greatest player to represent his country. Pretty high praise there, wouldn't you think?
That is very high praise. And I definitely, look, it's been a lot of international competitions over the years, but I think it's very safe to say that for the last 20, 30 years, he is certainly head and shoulders above anybody else.
100%. It was just a really nice quote from John Cooper. He's always admired Sidney Crosby. Heck, Mitch Marner had a really cool quote after the game saying that his dad was going to love the overtime goal because, Marner, he grew up watching Sidney Crosby. And he even said, like, to get the chance to play with him, it's a dream come true. And you can say that for a lot of players on Canada. A lot of these younger players who really grew up watching Sid in his peak years, now getting a chance to play with him at age 37. But Crosby, still one of the best players in the league, will go down as a top 5 player to ever play the game. Another outstanding performance, and it'll be very fascinating to see what he does against Team USA on Saturday. I cannot wait for that matchup in the preliminary round before we potentially get that in the championship game. But hey, we have to see how the rest of the round robin tournament goes. But speaking of Team USA, Gil, we're going to preview that game against Finland coming up here in the final segment right after this.
And today's episode is brought to you by Factor. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
All right, we're back here for the final segment of the Thursday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins. That is Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. So, Gil, we finally get to see Team USA in action tonight against Finland. That'll be on ESPN. And I don't know about you, man, but I am stoked to see this rendition of Team USA.
I am excited to see what this team can do. And I think, you look at this roster and there is so much talent and there are guys, deserving players who, could not be included just because of the limited roster space. But to me, if Team USA is going to win this tournament, Connor Hellebuck is probably the key to that victory and maybe their biggest advantage in this tournament.
100%. I think he is the best goaltender in this tournament, in my opinion. He is probably going to win the Vezina this year with the way that he is playing for the Winnipeg Jets. And I'm excited to see what he can do on the international stage here. What I was going to say before you jumped in, and by the way, no problem with that. By the way, you made a really good point. I have been waiting for this edition of the Team USA roster because I think this is the best USA roster of my lifetime for everyone out there. I'm 27, so I've been alive since 1997. I truly do think this is the best Team USA roster I have ever seen in my life. I mean, the talent that this team has now is through the roof. You're going to see Jack Eichel as a top line center with Kyle Connor and Matthew Tkachuk, Austin Matthews with Jake Gensel and Jack Hughes. That's just their top six, by the way.
Yeah.
That is a nasty top six. Obviously, you're not going to stack that up to Team Canada. Canada's top six is deeper, and they're just going to poach their best players. But Team USA did this mostly right. You take your best players, you play the cards as they come up, and you see if you can kind of eke out a small upset against Canada. For the record, by the way, I picked Team USA to win this tournament because I think the goaltending edge is going to come in handy down the line. But again, even their bottom six, you have Brady Tkachuk with JT Miller and Matt Boldy, Dylan Larkin with Vince Trocheck and Brock Nelson. Defensively, the main thing that stings still is that Quinn Hughes is not here. I just hope that he is getting healthy for the stretch run for the Canucks, and I'm excited to see him play at the Olympics in 26. But I feel like if Hughes were here, that would really take Team USA's roster over the top, in my opinion. I think he's the best defenseman in the league this year. He's been fantastic, but they still are very deep here. Slavin with Adam Fox, Werenski with McAvoy, all four having really good seasons. And you have Noah Hannafin and Brock Faber. Of course, Hellebuck is in goal. Finland, though, this is still a good roster up front. You know, Barkov and Ranson on that top line. I'm curious to see the chess match for that, by the way. Who are you putting Barkov out there against? Are you putting him out there against the Matthews line, or are you doing it against the Eichel line? Both are very dangerous. Eichel has really developed into one of the best two-way centers in the league, in my opinion. So I'm curious to see how Finland goes about that with the chess match there. They have Aho and Rupe Hintz on the second line. That's also going to be a lot of fun. The biggest weakness, though, for Finland right now is on the back end. No Miro Heiskanen there. That really stinks for them. They're just too banged up, I think, on the back end. I mean, they have Nico Mikla on the top pairing. Esa Lindell, he's a fine number 2, number 3, but having no Heiskanen there, I think, is really going to be a detriment to them. Finland, I think, is the 4th best roster of the 4 teams in this tournament, but they're still a good team. Like, they're going to be a tough out for whoever they play. But I think the U.S., they have the edge here in this one, but I still think it's going to be, again, a very tough matchup.
It is going to be tough, and I think the big edge for the United States is in goal. Here's the other thing, though, and you know, I wanted to ask you about this. You have a tournament like this, obviously all 4 teams, you're talking about all-star caliber players at all of these positions. One of the things that you want to make sure you do when you're building an Olympic team or a 4th nations tournament team, it's not just about putting the most talented guys out there. It's about teamwork. It's about knowing your role. Team USA, think about that 4th line. That 4th line is, you know, top 6 on any NHL team. Will those guys play more of a checking defensive first style when called upon, and how well will they work together? Those are the things that make the difference, because all 4 of these teams are extremely talented. So how well do you work within the role that you've been assigned, and how well do you work together with players you're usually not playing with? That really goes a long way into determining who wins these tournaments.
I agree. And it's nice that they combine that with also taking the majority of their best players. I felt like, Gil, the last time we saw, you know, the best on best for Team USA, that was the World Cup of Hockey in 2016. They didn't take their best players. They tried to fill these roles like with depth and defense and just checking two-way forwards, when obviously you're not going to stack up Canada talent-wise, but you still stand a much better chance of beating them in a tournament like this if you bring most of your best forwards and see what happens. And that's what Team USA did. They learned their lesson from that. They brought their best players. And you're also right, though. I'm curious to see how they fit their roles. You know, for example, the 3rd line with JT Miller, Brady Tkachuk, and Matt Boldy. That is going to be a very annoying line to play against. Truly, it is. Like Miller,
Yeah.
he plays like a rat. Brady Tkachuk, he plays like a rat. Matt Boldy, he's not afraid to get physical either. That's going to be a really fun line. I think is going to piss a lot of these other countries off during this. I think if that's the line next year at the Olympics, it's going to be the same way as well. You know, you have Matthews as your second line center. He's a sniper and a pure playmaker, but then you have Gensel as a pure sniper on that line. You have Jack Hughes who can do a bit of both. I like that combination. On the top line, you have Eichel. He can play both offense and defense. People need to stop sleeping on his defensive ability. Tkachuk and Connor, kind of the same way with the way they play make and the way they shoot. So I really like these combinations for Team USA. And then even defensively on the back end, you have Slavin. He's the more defensively responsible player on that pairing with Adam Fox. Fox will drive a lot of that offense, but Slavin, he is just so elite in his own end. I think it's him and Gustav Forsling as the best defensive defenseman in the league. I would probably lean Forsling a little bit, but Slavin is right up there. So I really like how Mike Sullivan has put together these pairings and these lines. I know a lot of Penguins fans are down on him these last couple of years, and rightfully so. I'm a bit down on him right now too, but I am still fascinated to see what he can do with this type of lineup.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. And you know, the great unknown before the tournament starts, like we didn't know how physical they were going to be, how intense the play was going to be. We saw that physicality and that intensity last night. How is Team USA going to actually play once they get out on the ice? That's the big question. And I, for one, am looking so much forward to Saturday when Canada and the United States go head to head. No disrespect to Sweden or Finland, because those teams are excellent. But especially now with everything that's going on, Canada versus USA takes on a little extra juice. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Oh, social media is going to be a war zone for that one. I know that. That's for sure. It's going to be a lot of fun watching that game. And as I said, Gil, it could be a preview of the championship game of the Four Nations face-off coming up a bit later during this 2-week break from the NHL play. But I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. The Friday crew will be back with the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. So for Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders, I am Hunter Hodies. Nick Soraris will be back with me next week to discuss more about the Four Nations face-off and everything else regarding the NHL. So stick around for that next week. But until then, thank you all so much for listening. And the Friday edition will be back on, Friday.